At this time, if the sworn members of the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office would please rise, all in unison, please. Please follow the command staff.
You are watching live coverage of Sergeant Michael Wilson's funeral service here. As you can see, the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office being escorted out and asked to be the first to leave. They're going to continue on to the procession in just a moment, but as everybody gets outdoors and out of the Charlotte Harbor Event Center, there will be more of a service outside, out on the lawn. That's where the 21-gun salute, the last call on the radio, bagpipes, the folding of the flag, and presentation to his wife and children will happen. But as folks here leave the event center, we heard from 9 different speakers. And one thing in common that we can definitely see is that this was a guy that was loved. People wanted to be around him. We heard so many different stories about what kind of a person he was. One of the people that spoke here just before this gentleman that's speaking right now and advising people to leave, this is Larry Taylor right now. Earlier before him was Pastor Rich Webb of the Faith Life Church. He quoted some scripture, even the lyrics to portions of the song Amazing Grace. And he said one thing, love is greater than evil. That at times like this, it's so difficult to even watch this as a stranger at home on your television screen, to remember that. Just to bring you up to speed again, Sergeant Wilson was killed on Monday night after being shot and killed in the line of duty. This is the first deputy that's fallen after being shot and killed with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office in the line of duty. This event center holds 2,000 people, so this may take some time for everybody to get outside, as so many people have shown up. We heard from Governor Scott. He was the second person to speak. He spoke briefly. He said a few things. He said a few words, and one thing that stood out was that we will keep you in our prayers. Speaking about his family, Sergeant Wilson had a wife named Joanne, who turns out to be a nurse. 3 children, Emily, Tyler, and Brandon, as every person that got up there to speak about mentioned his family. This is actually video now from earlier when they first walked in. Again, his wife, Joanne, Emily, Tyler, and Brandon. They even talked about, one of the speakers talked about how he met his wife. And what a story to hear about that at the beach. And what a surprise it was, and that he fell in love with her for the first time there. Love at first sight is what it sounded like. And told the romantic story of how he met his wife and then went on to have 3 beautiful children. Not one person up there did not mention another thing that's a common thread here that tells a lot about his character, that he was a prankster, which says that he wanted to make people smile and make people laugh. He certainly was something outside of the sheriff's office too. Sheriff Bill Prummel also spoke. He was the first person to speak and open up this part of the service. He talked about him as a brother. We all know there's a brotherhood in law enforcement, and gave his life doing what he loved. We have some sound of that right now too about what he said. Take a listen.
Mike made the ultimate sacrifice to keep this commitment. God bless each of you, and God bless all our brothers and sisters. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Matthew 5:9. Mike, you now sit beside him. We will never forget. We love you, brother.
That was Sheriff Bill Prummel speaking, the first person to come out and open the service here. Now we're taking a live look again as folks start to file out. The Charlotte County Sheriff's Office was asked to stand first following the service here. They are all still filing out at this time.
Have all Charlotte County Sheriff's Office civilian members, please.
And now, as you can hear right now, they're asking the civilian members to stand and then file out. This is done in obviously a very orderly way. There were so many people that are in there, and they will all be filing out outside to continue these services. If you're just tuning in right now, if you missed the first half of it, we've been watching the funeral service since about 10 o'clock sharp, pretty much. This is some video that was shot earlier. Even earlier, you can see right at the center of your screen, right in between all of those people, is the American flag draped over the casket of Sergeant Wilson, as his family is sitting in the front, and of course his fellow deputies and fellow men and women from the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office honoring him. We actually heard from a lot of people that he worked with. Sheriff Bill Prummel was holding back tears in the beginning, and how difficult it is to get up there and speak about a man that they wanted everyone, including us, including you at home, they wanted you to know who he really was. And as we mentioned earlier, everybody had a story to talk about how funny he was. You almost forgot for a minute that people were cracking smiles and reminiscing. Let's listen again to how he remembered him.
Sergeant Wilson was a defender of his community, and his service will never be forgotten. Families in Charlotte County and across the state of Florida sleep safely because of heroes like Sergeant Wilson.
That was Governor Rick Scott speaking as well. He was the second person to come up and speak, saying a few lines, and again speaking personally to his wife and children. Governor Scott also sending condolences along with his own family, and what a loss it is to Southwest Florida. He's been also recently meeting with a lot of law enforcement this week in Southwest Florida and asked that the community, that people come up and show support. The family has, as difficult as this has been for them, and as hard as it is to stand and be in a room with so many people, they've appreciated the support that strangers have shown. There was a Facebook site even made talking about what a wonderful man Sergeant Wilson that he was. Our Patrick Nolan has been outside of the event center. He joins us now. I can't imagine, this is such an emotional thing to watch, Patrick. I know we can feel it just even at home, like I'm saying, through the TV screen. I can't imagine how it is where you're standing right now, Patrick.
It is a really powerful experience for everybody here, and just looking at all of these officers, every member of the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office out here for this event, Punta Gorda Police covering some of their shifts so that law enforcement is still provided for the community. And by the way, I'm keeping my voice low because we are just yards away from where the family is going to be seated here shortly, and we definitely want to be as respectful as possible and as really as invisible as we can be as we bring you this process. I want to tell you what's going to be happening here within the next few minutes, over the next 20 minutes, and that is the family will be seated in these white chairs right beneath the tent here, and the casket will come out. Right in front of it will be a tradition in law enforcement when an officer goes down, a riderless horse. So the riderless horse will come out, the casket will be brought out, then a presentation of arms. The pallbearers come, they prepare the casket, the clergy then says a few words there. Then there'll be a call to attention, and something I think most of us are familiar with, no matter how many times you've seen a funeral for law enforcement or a dignitary. There'll be a 21-gun salute here out on the north lawn right next to the Charlotte Event Center. Taps will be played. There are some bagpipers just on the other side of the Charlotte County officers there. This is a group of about 30 or so bagpipers, many of them from law enforcement and firefighting. Some of the firefighters call themselves guns and hoses, so I think Deputy Wilson might appreciate that wittiness given his background and his sense of humor. We know that he loved puns. The company he started was Law Enforcement. They will fold the flag here on the lawn, and then this is a very powerful moment. It'll be presented to his widow, Joanne, at that point. The sheriff, Bill Promell, will be making that presentation. He'll also be giving some gifts to his 3 children. They're all teenagers, the youngest 13, the oldest goes to Port Charlotte High School, the same place where his dad went to high school, and also where his dad worked as a school resource officer for a few years. A really difficult time right now for the family and for the widow, but as you heard the pastor say just a few minutes ago, everyone has been impressed by her strength and courage as she has led the family through this really difficult time. After the 21-gun salute, Amazing Grace will be played, and then there will be a flyover, and there's been a recent development with this. There'll possibly be one less chopper. The flyover involves helicopters. It's the one from the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office and a few others from supporting agencies. But just within the past 45 minutes, one of the choppers overheated a little bit while in flight. There was a little bit of smoke in the cockpit. It made an emergency landing at Peachtree Lane and Veterans Boulevard in Northport, so extreme northern Charlotte County. No one's been hurt, but certainly that's something that could delay the procession, we're told by Florida Highway Patrol, by up to half an hour. And if you're watching on TV and if you're in the Port Charlotte area and if for any reason you're making plans to be on the roads, we do want to tell you from a logistics point of view, the ceremony went a little bit longer than expected. Now we've had this emergency landing from one of the helicopters involved in the flyover, so things will be going a little bit longer than previously anticipated. The procession will go on just a little bit later, and I want to tell you about that part right now. Right after the flyover, there will be the final sign-off. This, having covered this before when Andrew Widman was killed, Fort Myers police officer, a few years ago, is really one of the most difficult parts for everyone in the community. It's a final sign-off on the radio, so they will call for Deputy Wilson. There will be no response, and that silence is truly deafening and just agonizing to hear. It is a law enforcement tradition. That is the way it is put out there to his fellow officers and the community, that he will not be returning. And it's going to take on special meaning in this case, because we know that Deputy Wilson, right after he was shot, that bullet just missing his bulletproof vest was just enough in the right spot to kill him. We know that he was able to get on the radio himself. And the first thing he said wasn't help for himself. The first thing he said was shots fired. In other words, a warning for any other officers who were coming to the scene. So that sense of sacrifice was literally there until the very end with Deputy Wilson. There will be that final sign-off on the radio. The pallbearers will then take the casket back to the hearse. There will be 4 horsemen, and then the bagpipers will help escort the beginning part of the funeral procession, which will then continue through town over the bridge, cross the station where he had been for many years, and also cross in front of the apartment complex where he was killed. This is something that the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office thought long and hard about. They decided, as the pastor indicated just a short while ago, that love is stronger than evil. They don't want to shrink back from where this happened. The procession will go by there. There will be people all along the way, and if you would like to be a part of that procession, you can just go to our website right now, fox4now.com, to pay your respects. You can also pay your respects online. It's through the funeral home. It's ltaylorfuneral.com. You can also go to our website and get this information, but you can post your condolences, and these will go directly to the family. All right, we will continue to monitor what's happening here live, bring it to you just as best as we can, and as I said, keeping my voice low and perhaps pausing or not saying anything because we are so close to what's going on here. We know that's what the family would want, but we also know, having spoken to close friends and family, they do want the fact that he's being honored so publicly to be known widely. They want to know the sacrifice and courage that he showed, and we are honored to be a part of that. Miriam?
All right, Patrick, and yes, speaking of which, we will honor that, of course, and wanting to be silent there, too. I wanted to mention, too, that you've been there since last night. You met a lot of people that have been coming and going, and we keep hearing about this sense of humor and how they want to remember him. And through all these traditions, it is so touching and so powerful and so respectful. Do you get the sense that people want to really tell these stories about him? I can imagine you've been hearing so many other different stories as well, just being surrounded with so many of his loved ones.
Well, as you pointed out earlier in our coverage, the theme is a lot of the times the same. It always starts with a smile with him, sometimes mischievous, definitely that sense of life in his eyes, and I think that's why it's been so especially difficult for this community. Having talked to some of the folks who worked with him in the sheriff's office, I mean shoulder to shoulder for 20 years yesterday, to a person, they all said that he just was full of joy and brought joy to other people. That is saying something, considering he was in charge of the street crimes unit. If you know anything about law enforcement, it's one of the toughest jobs in the business. You're dealing with some of the most undesirable people in our communities. It's just that simple, and some of the most dangerous. So he was certainly prepared for any danger that he faced in the field, but the fact that he died in the way that he did, a number of his colleagues told me they weren't shocked. He's the type of deputy, when he hears it on the call, there's a dispatch system. So normally a deputy would be told, all right, you need to go there before they go on their own. But he was the type who would go before he was dispatched. If he was close enough, he would do it. He certainly took on that risk by responding to this call by himself. He knew backup was coming before he went to the bottom of that stairwell where he was killed. Remember, the shooter was at the top of the stairwell. But he took on that risk, and no one sounded surprised that he would do that. He was the one who was the first person out there. After 20 years in any job, especially when you're talking about something as tough as law enforcement, for someone to still have that, for lack of a better phrase, rookie attitude, as some of them said it, and I only say that in terms of enthusiasm, it was very impressive, deeply impressive. impressive to people. So many people talked about the fact that we're on the water here, the beautiful Peace River. In fact, you might be able to see some of the fire boats here, and they're creating a beautiful honoring display of him. But he loved the water. He was famous for his fishing and his boating. He also liked Boca Grande. That was one of his favorite fishing spots. But as you heard during the service, perhaps his favorite spot along the southwest Florida coast was Siesta Key. That's where he asked his wife Joanne to marry him. Acted like he dropped something, and it was actually the ring as he got down on one knee, and that certainly elicited a lot of awes, and I'm sure he would be smiling down on his pastor who said, wasn't he a romantic? But he certainly didn't apologize for being a family man. And of course, it's where he met his wife, was also on the water, right on Port Charlotte Beach, and one of his colleagues teasing there in one of the eulogies saying, you mean you met a good-looking woman on Port Charlotte Beach? And I'm sure that Wilson certainly would have appreciated that. I know all of his colleagues here smiled with that. They shared such a strong bond, men and women throughout this agency, as you see him lined up behind here. And by the way, they're in scorching heat out here in full uniform in their bulletproof vests. As you know, he was wearing one when he was shot and killed, the bullet just narrowly missing him. But the stories by and large are about the joy that he brought into other people's lives and the joy that he celebrated as being part of the Southwest Florida community, and someone who overcame a lot. This was a guy who was raised by his grandparents. His dad was not in the picture. His mom has already died. He is survived by a brother and two sisters, and of course those 3 young kids. This is what someone who might have been identified early on as perhaps at risk in a community. You can go a couple of different ways, and sometimes people take it in a way that's not going to be good for them or their neighbors, but he went in a direction to help other people, perhaps some like himself. And many say that he made up for perhaps some of the lack of support he would have had from traditional mom and dad and his own growing up by being such a super dad to his kids. And his oldest son, who's in Port Charlotte High, same place that he went, same place he works as an SRO, was never too old, even when he was in his little Explorer uniform looking the law enforcement part, to get those hugs and kisses from dad. He's a very expressive man, and I think it's made it easier in that sense for many of his loved ones here to express just who he was. And to a person, even though a lot of people can't talk on camera, we respect that. We would never want anyone, a lot of people would say to me, I'd love to be able to tell his story because I want people who didn't know him to know what he meant for our community, but I just can't get through the interview without crying. They had their own struggles there, but they would always say, please make sure you let people know who this was. And that might be why you and I find ourselves talking so much, and many of us in the media. We've covered so many dark and sad stories, and to cover a celebration of such a beautiful life is really an honor for us.
Yeah, it really is, Patrick. You know, as you're bringing up those stories, I can really picture when Lieutenant Jill McBee said that she put his kids in a headlock, and to get those kisses. You know, you hear those stories, and you know, it's okay to smile about that. He is to be celebrated. So thank you so much. Yeah. All right, we'll talk to Patrick and again here in just a little bit. Let's go over to Sarah Belsole. She is over by where the procession will be taking place. Patrick talked a little bit about that and what's to be coming here in the next couple of, well, minutes or even half an hour or so. Sarah Belsole is live over where the procession will be going on. Sarah, what can you tell us?
Hey Miriam, yeah, a lot more activity going on here than we saw earlier today. I want you to take a look over my shoulder now. There's a lot of people that have gathered in the crowd to line up and pay their respects. We have people holding flags, a lot of people who brought their children out and explaining to them, you know, how important it is to come together as a community and to honor those who fight for us every day. I spoke with a few of the residents out here before. Some of them didn't even know Sergeant Wilson, but they said it was very important that they came out. Some people said they lined up as early as 8 o'clock today, and they're all lining that procession route. I want to give you another look at what that route is going to be. So if you want to come out, you're more than welcome to come out, show your support, and also if you are driving around the area at that time, to be careful because those roads probably will be closed. They're going to come out from the event center and they're going to go on 41 over the bridge and stay on 41 until they hit Veterans Boulevard. They're going to turn right on Veterans Boulevard and go almost the entire length of the road. Now what's important there is they will be passing by the Lakes of Toscana apartments where Sergeant Wilson was killed. So a really emotional moment that's supposed to be going on there. And then they're going to turn right onto Harbor Boulevard and they're going to come back here to the event center where the family will have some private time. So a lot going on, a lot of things are going to happen this processional. There are mounted officers on horsebacks. There's a lot of motorcycles from law enforcement officers from all around the state of Florida here. So a lot going on and a lot of people ready to pay their respects. So we'll keep you up updated on when that procession is going to start, and we'll give you some live looks of that procession once it gets going. Back to you, Miriam.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much. As she mentioned, strangers going to be lining that area, been there since so early this morning, standing outside in those conditions to pay their respects. We're taking a look right now of, I believe this was from video from earlier. As you can see on the screen there too, we should also mention, we're hearing so much about what a family man he was and how he will be so missed in not just the department, but also at home. And those are some pictures that are up on the screen there from his family. Patrick had mentioned the youngest being 13, and with 3 children, the youngest being 13 and the oldest in high school as well. You can imagine there are some stories to be told there in raising a family, and especially a gentleman like this that we're hearing about, Sergeant Wilson, and some of his pranking, and just a lovable, lovable guy. We'll be seeing some more folks filing out of the event center. As we mentioned earlier, it has just drawn such a crowd. We just can't ignore that. We have to keep mentioning that. It holds 2,000 people in there, so it has to be enough time to get everybody out there so that they can also enjoy the second part of the service. We heard from former Sheriff Bill Cameron. He talked a lot about him being a friend and the radios. He talked about Sergeant Wilson being on the radio and that at one time sort of getting him in trouble for something, but Sergeant Wilson thought he was joking. So getting very personal with all of these stories. Let's hear how Bill Cameron remembered him.
I listen. Your guys are out there stopping cars. You're getting arrests. You're doing all the right things. I hear your guys all the time on the radio. He said, and I hear you all the time, constantly on the radio. And he said, thank you, Sheriff. And I said, that wasn't a compliment. He said, what? I said, you got to shut up.
And you heard him say it just right there. He loved to talk, but that was one of the best things about him. And he certainly used his talents in the force and also at home. These are more people. This is the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office here from earlier when they were filing in. They also had a salute to the casket of Sergeant Wilson right at the center of that building there. We know that we heard from his night crawler friends. That's what they call themselves when they work overnight. As we know, Sergeant Wilson worked a number of shifts, but he worked overnight in those night hours, taking all kinds of calls. He was on a traffic call when he was then called to his final call at the apartment complex where he was shot and killed. One of the buddies there, they talked about how much fun they had with him at night and called him a hero and unique. That's another word. Unique is the word we keep hearing. It sounds like the characteristics he had is so rare to find one person with all of these different distinct characteristics. Let's hear right now how some of his, what he referred to as nightcrawler buddies remembered him.
A nightcrawler doesn't act heroic for the glamour, nor does this asset fade as he gets older. God created different people in different ways. In Mike, God created a soldier.
That was Sergeant Chris Williams, one of his nightcrawler buddies that always worked with him. They referred to each other as buddy. He even said one thing, and I'm quoting this from he said, the hero you portray at work does not go away at home. And that's how he has been described. We're taking a live look right now as more people are filing out of the event center to go outside, where more services will continue outside with the honor guard. The family will be seated. The pallbearers will also then be out to prepare the casket, which we do understand is shortly to be coming out from the inside of the event center. While outside, and again, this is a live look right now as they prepare to continue the service here. They will hold the 21-gun salute. Bagpipers, we heard from all over, are going to be taking part in this. And as we know, anytime when a law enforcement officer passes, people from all over the country come together. We talk about that brotherhood, we talk about that togetherness, and this is where we see it too. Another emotional part that is expected to be happening is the folding of the flag and the presentation of the flag to his wife. And then there'll be some gifts given to his 3 children. We'll also hear that final radio call, and then that deafening silence as a final call to Sergeant Wilson. That is also just a very emotional thing. You know, at these events too, you can almost feel the breeze is different. There's something different in the air that just casts over everybody. You can see a lot of media attention there, bringing back to why his family, as painful as this is very appreciative that strangers have come out. They've been very welcoming to letting us share stories about him. And as we heard from so many different speakers, so many people that he worked with, they're always saying what a buddy he was and how they wanted everybody to know what a good guy he was. This wasn't somebody that they wanted to go unnoticed. And he's more than a 20-year veteran with the sheriff's office. Grew up around here, went to high school here, so obviously his duty on the force there or with the department was certainly held very close to his heart. He was a school resource officer as well. We noticed yesterday, even during the viewing, there were a lot of children that were showing up, or young people, maybe even teenage people, a lot of friends obviously coming from his teenage children. And we know that he reached a lot of these kids in so many different ways, and coming from a very personal standpoint. We learned a lot about him this past week, and especially for today as well, as we got a chance to hear from these 9 different speakers that decided to go up and talk about Sergeant Wilson. This is a live look right now outside where the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office were the first to be filed out and asked to go outside. It appears they are standing guard right now where they will continue these honoring services outside. We talked to Patrick. Patrick Nolan was outside as well, and just talking about the feeling that people are getting. And there's a silence that comes through where you don't have to speak. Nobody has to speak. We saw the flag, the American flag, draped over his casket. The American flag also hanging over where we've touched base with Sarah Belsol, where the procession will begin. And she gave us details on that. They will be going by the Lakes of Toscana apartment complex. That's where he was shot and killed, where Sergeant Wilson was shot and killed. Here is that horse, the horse that Patrick was speaking about, being walked through, the riderless horse. And it has to be a dark horse. That is very significant with some symbolism.
You're watching live coverage right now of funeral services for Deputy Mike Wilson, Patrick Nolan speaking, and keeping my voice as quiet as possible. We're about 10 yards away from where the family's seated right now, and we're here with their permission, but we still want to be as inconspicuous as possible during what's been a very difficult time for them. This is also a highly ceremonial time. When a law enforcement officer is killed in the line of duty, there are a number of traditions that you'll be seeing unfolding here for the family to watch. The family was just seated a few minutes ago. It was painful to see his kids. His wife, Joanne, was being escorted by their daughter, Emily, who's just about as tall as her mom now. She's just a teenager, a close family friend on the other side. And then the two sons coming behind, and his youngest, Tyler, just looks like a little kid. It is heartbreaking to see them seated here. The governor's under the tent as well as a number of dignitaries showing their respect for the family. His oldest son, Brandon, also seated. Both of his sons wearing suits, which is just heartbreaking to see. It's not something that you want to see for young kids. And on this beautiful Saturday, hot as heck, but beautiful Saturday in Punta Gorda, a day that I think any of his close family and friends would say he would more likely want to be out on the water. We'll pause now and listen to the next portion of the ceremony. We have a presentation of arms that happens here on the North Lawn. As you've probably been able to observe, it's got a sense of military orderliness in how this is presented. 21 gun salute now underway. You'll see the officers just beyond the bushes here in front of the Peace River as they fire in honor of Deputy Mike Wilson. And now taps is being played, just the faint sound of taps if you listen closely here. Taps has just concluded, and now you'll be seeing some officers approach here. The deputy in the back there is holding something in her hands with great respect and reverence. These are typically something that the sheriff will present to family members. You saw her just break away there. The flag, once it comes off the coffin, and that will be done very carefully, again, with a sense of reverence and protocol. It's to be folded in a certain way. And this flag, in just a matter of minutes, will be presented to his widow, Joanne. The sheriff himself, Bill Promell, will make that presentation. This is, of course, a flag that has the most emotion attached to it on this day, but throughout Punta Gorda and Charlotte County, flags are flying at half-staff. It's at the request of the sheriff. As it's carefully folded, Deputy Wilson being remembered as a patriotic man, truly one of those guys who loved God and country and his family and his job so deeply. Sense of enthusiasm about that job that was with him until the very end. The first to respond to this call, as we all know, it seems hard to believe, it feels like a year ago, but it was just 5 days ago that he was called to a domestic disturbance at Lakes of Toscana Apartments. A son claiming that his father was hitting him and his mother. Deputy Wilson approaching the apartment building at the base of the stairwell, feeling that it was the best call for him to go in and intervene, even though he had no other deputies at his side at the time. He had called for other units to respond. And the shooter waiting at the top of the staircase, firing that fatal shot, pierced his chest, just missing his bulletproof vest. It's a community in shock 5 days after the fact. In the 90-plus year history of the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, he is the first officer to be shot and killed in the line of duty. He and his wife, Joanne, have been married for as long as he's been with the Sheriff's Office, over 20 years. And sitting next to her are their 3 young kids, all of them teens. The oldest goes to Port Charlotte High School. That's his dad's alma mater. And it's also where his dad worked as a school resource officer, and he was one of those deputies who was as equally popular with the students, good and bad, and staff and parents. Many people here telling us he believed in the goodness of people, despite some of the very tough things he saw in his job. Head of the street crimes unit for the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office at one point, more recently a road patrol supervisor. Very difficult. These deputies have a lot of ground to cover. So these road supervisors are critical in making sure the law enforcement protection is in a place where it needs to be when they're needed. I spoke with the former sheriff, Bill Cameron, who was also very, very close friends with Deputy Wilson, and he told me he was one of the deputies who would always be there when you need him. The flag now being handed off, and you can see the very deliberate motions that are accompanied this really powerful event. It's not as simple as just handing his family the flag. There will be a heartfelt salute, as you will see. And notice the flag is held over the officer's heart. Turns again in a military style. There's a deliberateness in the movements here, as the flag is now presented to his widow, Joanne. Her children on either side of her. You'll see another deputy in the foreground. These gifts have been handed off. They look like small plaques, perhaps, will now be presented. And there is one for each child. Brandon, the oldest, Emily, daddy's girl, and their youngest son, Tyler. Sheriff Promell now being handed these 3 gifts. One will be given to each child with words of comfort and support, and above all, deep gratitude. You're looking at a family that has made the ultimate sacrifice. It wasn't just Deputy Wilson. He's also survived by a brother and 2 sisters. One of the close friends of Deputy Wilson told me yesterday she takes some comfort in knowing that his children are old enough to remember this, to see this through the eyes of a teenager. We all know, if you have kids, there are your internal struggles that go on during that time in your life. And now this very painful external struggle that this family shares. His oldest son, Brandon, just being presented with his gift. There is a picture a lot of people like to see of his son in a explorer uniform, wearing a similar law enforcement uniform that his dad did. And now the bagpipes playing Amazing Grace. Members of this bagpipe group come from all over the state, even other parts of the country. They're not used to playing together. They're from different groups. Some are retired police officers or firefighters. Others are active duty. On this short notice, more than 30 bagpipers coming together to honor Deputy Wilson. The next portion of this ceremony calls for a flyover, and they're coming right over the Peace River. You will make out these 3 helicopters coming in our direction. Now, as I reported earlier, there was a little bit of trouble with one of the choppers earlier. During the funeral service, one of them overheated. There was smoke inside the cockpit. There had to be an emergency landing at Peachtree and Veterans Boulevard in Northport in North Charlotte County. No one was hurt. Of course, it's the last thing they want is any kind of complication in this. My understanding from folks at Florida Highway Patrol is that they may be 1 chopper short, but either way, you'll see the triangle formation here from these 3 choppers. Not all of them belongs to the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. They have support from other agencies, as they have had throughout this entire process, including providing law enforcement security and safety for the community today so that most of the deputies can be here. Punta Gorda Police kicking in with that and other area law enforcement agencies covering those shifts. Choppers approaching here, royal palm trees in the foreground, over the Peace River where he enjoyed boating so much. It's a poignant moment during that flyover because they come over as a group, as law enforcement officers work. But just as they come over the family, the heart of the ceremony, one breaks off to the side. And now the radio call, final radio call for Deputy Wilson. Just listen to the final radio call for Deputy Wilson. It is probably the most painful ritual in law enforcement. They call for a deputy who will not answer, but who's being honored right now for answering the call when someone was in need and paid with his life. You'll see the bagpipers now on the move. They're going to the front of the event center. You're looking at live images of what's happening behind it, between the event center and the Peace River. The bagpipers will be leading the procession, the funeral procession, which is long. It's 25 miles long as it goes through the community. His widow, Joanne, now standing. You'll see their daughter, Emily, holding her right arm, followed by their sons, the taller one, Brandon, The shorter one on the left, Tyler. They follow the casket, as is custom at a funeral. They are the part of the procession everyone is most concerned about in this community right now, as other relatives now make their way out of the tent. The bagpipers will go to the front of the building, and there will be 4 horsemen as part of that procession. The horsemen and the bagpipers will begin the procession, but from there it'll become mostly police vehicles, the hearse, of course, and the car carrying the family members. It will go through town, including by Lake Tuscana Apartments, where he was shot and killed. And the procession will actually return here to the event center, where there'll be a private gathering. There'll be no media coverage, no public, a very intimate gathering of family, very close friends, and of course colleagues, to show support for one another. Charlotte County Sheriff's deputies, staff support, and personnel all standing at attention in blazing heat on this Saturday afternoon. Absolutely scorching heat, and you would never know by looking at the way these folks are standing at attention. A somber mood, showing their dedication to him and the family by being here. There's a slow trickle out from the last few mourners who were underneath the tent at the front of the ceremony. You might see a couple people on the move in the foreground here. This is as Governor Rick Scott leaves the area. Governor Scott, very familiar with Southwest Florida. He called Naples home until he was elected governor. He still returns here. He is on his way out after offering words of support for the family and words of praise for Deputy Wilson. A lot of tears, as you will see, stone-faced, but tears among many of these deputies. We're going to shift our focus now to the procession itself. 4 in your corner, Sarah Belsole, standing by just outside the convention center with that part of the story. Sarah?
A really solemn feeling here right now. A lot of the buzz that was going on before has kind of stopped here, and everyone is just waiting for the processional to start. A few moments ago, the fire trucks playing over the intercom a little more information about Sergeant Wilson and his birthday, and everyone had a moment of silence, people taking their flags, their hats, and bowing their heads in remembrance of Sergeant Wilson. And behind me is where the processional is going to start coming from. You can see some of the lights are on, going to come our way, and the casket's going to be wheeled out, followed by the family, and they will process down this road and on to US 41. So everyone has really gathered here waiting for that processional, very respectful, just waiting to pay their final respects to Sergeant Wilson. And we'll have more for you when that processional starts. And they're going to go all through. This crowd is all lined up. There's people all lined up on the bridge to get over to 41, and a lot more people that I'm told on the other side waiting to pay their final respects. Back to you guys.
All right, Sarah, and that's what it is about paying those final respects. We saw Joanne and their 3 children there following the casket. Let's get back to Patrick Nolan, who is down there where those services were just taking place. And Patrick, that final radio call just really, it just resonates throughout the air, and it gets to right to the center of your heart. And there's just something about that silence that just speaks volumes. I just can't imagine how it is where you are right now.
You know, Miriam, I think that's something we struggle to do sometimes in the media, is just to shut the heck up and get out of the way of the story. And I'll tell you, it's been very easy for me to do here. As many of his friends and family said, Deputy Wilson himself was quite the talker, not a big fan of silence himself. So it makes this all the more poignant here. Just seeing his family come into the tent behind me here as they came with the casket was just so difficult to watch, because his kids are so young, and we all know that. But just seeing them in person and seeing their faces faces, and these, I call them little boys. I mean, his oldest son's in high school, but just, in these suits, they're going through something that most adults would expect to do, and that is your parents precede you into death. Not when you're a 13-year-old and thinking you might go fishing with your dad this weekend, or perhaps spend it with remote control airplanes, which Deputy Wilson loves so much. He loved to be a big kid in a lot of ways, and I think that's an honor when we say that about him, because so many people said it. That was definitely a theme here. People don't want to forget the joy that he brought, but very difficult to see his wife, as strong and as courageous as she's been, certainly needing that support from their daughter Emily as they held arm in arm there, and very close loved ones around them. But in the end, only each one of these family members carries this emotional burden. It does become very personal. As you said, Miriam, I think it becomes personal for all of us who are involved here. I think the silent moments were certainly some of the toughest. Seeing that flag come from the coffin, it was folded very carefully in a precise way. There's a specific protocol for that in this kind of situation. And then it felt like slow motion as the flag was handed to the next officer, put over the heart. There's a salute to the flag, and then the sheriff down on a knee, presenting this so very humbly, thanking Joanne, his wife, for that ultimate sacrifice. Her husband no longer in the picture because of one radio call just 5 days ago. The sheriff then presenting those gifts to the children, so we definitely wanted to remain silent for that. And then the other one, and I think this is the most agonizing of all, is when that final radio call goes out. Sergeant Wilson will not be responding, and this is certainly a very stylized ritual, very carefully done, and it just feels dramatic because it is. And certainly funerals are about feeling the sense of finality, and there is no way to get past it, no matter how much shock you're in, when you hear the dispatcher calling out for Sergeant Wilson and there's no response. Miriam?
Yeah, and we watched, there was one shot where we could see a good glimpse of Joanne and that face, and just such strength, because it is no easy feat to follow a loved one's casket knowing that you have your children right beside you as well, Patrick. Was there anything else there as far as underneath that tent is where his relatives were, where the closest family members were? I keep thinking about those close family members and going through all of this and that methodical, traditional honor. This is all going to settle for them, and this is what life is going to be like for them without him. What can you tell us a little bit more about what we couldn't see from the camera's point of view with you being there?
Well, we were a little frustrated in bringing you this part of the picture, and everything feels like small potatoes when I say that things didn't go quite as planned in a situation like this, because ultimately what didn't go as planned was for Deputy Wilson to return from that call. So I just want you to know that I'm keeping it in perspective, but we were positioned here to try to show you as much, but the governor had such a heavy security detail that so I think what, some of our viewers may have been seeing was, looking over their shoulders or some heads in the background with their little earpieces back here so they can talk to one another in security. So that is some of what people didn't see, is the security presence here is super heavy, and not something we want to emphasize or the family wants emphasized in this kind of case. However, it definitely was so. They had bomb-sniffing dogs out here as early as 7 in the morning, so people in position, everyone wanting to be here for the same reason, to honor Deputy Wilson. Miriam? Wow,
what an event for strangers to be coming up and see such a thing as well. We're taking this live look right now too. If you just want to touch base with our viewers, if they're just checking in right now, we're also talking with Patrick Nolan, who has been telling us the step-by-step of what just happened here after the indoor services as they continue this procession. Let's get over to Sarah Belsol, who has been on standby and on scene as well, carrying through this procession. Sarah.
Hi, Miriam. Yeah, we're starting to hear the bagpipes playing, and we're starting to see the processional come slowly out of the event center. Lights are flashing. There's a lot going on behind the cars that are coming. The band, the bagpipes, we hear drumming. Everyone is starting to line the streets, get closer, get their cameras out. People are holding balloons and flags and really just trying to stand tall. A lot of people have their arms crossed and just paying their respects as the procession gets closer. We are now starting to see some of the motorcycles are rounding the corner. Earlier I saw that they were from different law enforcement agencies from across Florida. I saw some from Broward County, Pinellas County, and of course all of the local law enforcement here. So they're waiting right here for the rest of the processional to catch up. We can also see some of the horses coming. So we'll keep you guys updated on as they start to get closer. Back to you, Miriam.
Okay, Sarah, we can see you are right there on the line as well. There are those blue balloons, if you saw in the background there too, with some children holding those balloons. That blue represents law enforcement, and to show your support. A lot of local businesses all around Charlotte County, all around Southwest Florida, especially Charlotte County, that are usually closed for, say, only Christmas and Thanksgiving, closed today to show that respect and to be able to take part in those services. A lot of trees in the area have those blue ribbons right outside of the event center. There were blue ribbons tied around some of the signs. That's a look right now. In the bottom of your screen, you can see the fire boats with the water cannons there. That was also part of the service as all of these teams around Southwest Florida show up. We also saw presence of the Fort Myers Police Department there as well. It's not just the Sheriff's Office or the Charlotte County community. It's all of Southwest Florida that feels this, and all of these first responders and those who put themselves in harm's way every day are going to show their support. You can see there are the horses as well. That was also part of this procession. I don't know if Sarah is still there. It looks as though a lot of the people now are coming back out. She is, I know, going to speak with other people and lining the route there and monitoring the situation. So we'll keep checking in with her here in just a little bit. To reiterate, though, that what's happening right now is this procession. It is scheduled to be going through some different roads here in Charlotte County, even passing the apartment complex where Sergeant Wilson was killed. It was the Lakes of Toscana. You can see right there, it's highlighted in red. Just another note for people, if you're concerned about traffic, if you live in the area, if you weren't able to get to this service, but you need to know, obviously, information that you need to know what's happening around, it's listed right there on your screen as well. Some of the road closures, I'll go through them for you very quickly here as well. Northbound US 41 from Olympia Boulevard to Veterans Boulevard, then to eastbound on Veterans to Peachland Boulevard. Then it's going to go westbound Peachland Boulevard to Harbor Boulevard, and then south on Harbor Boulevard to back to US 41, and then southbound US 41, and then ending there back at the event center where all of these services just took place. It's highlighted again red on your screen there, as I know that will be affecting a lot of people. The motorcade there also in the front. Patrick was talking about a lot of that heavy detail, a lot of security. So a lot of new sights for people that may be going to show their support and just in awe of all of the traditions that happen around this. Governor Rick Scott showing his support as well, and even saying a few words in the actual funeral service if you were not able to catch that. And just to recap a little bit of that as well, as we hang on this live picture right here again of the procession, there are some motorcyclists, some of them from the police department coming through. You can see the sirens, obviously. You can hear the roar of those cycles as well. We'll obviously take our time as we watch this. You can hear that faint sound of the sirens in the background too, which is also a sign we hear as people as a sign of a call to duty for some folks too who are in this law enforcement. And just to talk about the route again and where they're going to be headed, they will be going through US 41. We'll then be heading over to Veterans, and then to Peachland Boulevard, and then heading around the route and passing, and we keep mentioning this, and passing the Lakes of Toscana apartment complex. We did get a chance to speak to a lot of residents who live there as well, and how shocked, obviously, as you can imagine, they are. But that is very important to be part of that route. Let's talk to Sarah about that a little bit too, about why they're heading around that area. And tell us a little more about the route, Sarah. You're there on the ground, and a little more of what you're seeing from your vantage point, Sarah.
Yeah, Miriam, the procession really going into full swing right now. We have two Charlotte County Sheriff deputy cruisers leading the pack here, followed by a slew of motor squad officers, like I said before, from different counties, following after those two cars. Then you have the hearse and then the mounted police. And I don't know if you guys can see, but from here I can just see hundreds of people just pouring out of the funeral home, coming in behind them. So we really do have a packed road here, and everyone just looks like they're getting in place to make a left out of here and go over that 41 bridge. Miriam?
Sarah, have we heard how long this is expected to be taking? I know we're talking about the route quite a bit here too, and how long people nearby can also expect this to be closed for?
I've been hearing kind of a few different things, from anywhere from half an hour to maybe even more. So if you are not a part of this and you're trying to drive around the area, I would probably stay clear just for the next hour or so to give plenty of space for the processional to take place. It does from here look like quite a lengthy processional with a lot of officers involved. So I would personally just stay clear of the area if you can, and if you can, just pull over, get on the sidewalk, and just show your support. You're not going to miss it. There's a ton of officers and flashing lights here. Miriam?
Okay. Yeah, that's some good advice there, too. As we know, sometimes you can see there's a large gathering. There's a lot of people involved in this, and a lot of people lining the roadway as well. Sarah, I keep mentioning that we see a lot of children. Have you seen a lot of children as well, sort of almost learning a little bit, too, about what this all means and what's going on here?
Right, there are a lot of children here, and I've been able to hear a lot of parents really taking time to talk to their children and tell them the importance of why they're here. Some of these children, I heard them asking, you know, I don't know who Sergeant Wilson is, you know, what did he do? And the parents are doing a very good job at making sure that their children understand what he did, who Sergeant Wilson was, and how important it is for the community to come together. And everyone I've talked to has said that they are in awe of how great the support has been for the community, and Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda and everyone really coming out and showing Sergeant Wilson that respect that he needs. Miriam?
Yeah, lots of lessons to be learned here as well. As for a lot of children, this is the first time they would see such a thing. We're talking about the conditions as well, Sarah. We know it is incredibly hot here, but clearly not a huge obstacle for people, and that shows also how important this really is. Doesn't matter if it's the middle of August in Southwest Florida. It's a beautiful sight, and we should see in the corner of our screen the water cannons that are going over the Peace River. We're seeing these blue balloons. I'd mentioned earlier, Sarah, if you can still hear me, about that is the color of law enforcement. Just being around the area there this morning, do you get the sense that even just local businesses also doing these little symbols to be able to show the support as well?
Right, we have all of the blue ribbons here. We have a ton of support. There's a hotel nearby and apartments, and all of those people that work there and they're all coming out and showing their support. And I'm sure through downtown Punta Gorda as well, with all of those businesses here, it looks like everyone, no one is inside. Everyone is just lining that sidewalk to show their support.
Right, and from the camera angle that you're able to give us here, we can see that flood of people just filling up the lens for us, so I can only imagine what it is there in person. Thank you, Sarah. We had mentioned and just showed you a few minutes ago those water cannons, the boats that are in the harbor. You could see it on the top corner of your screen there. Patrick Nolan's a little bit closer to that. What does all this mean, Patrick, and how long have they been there? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's just such a beautiful tribute to Deputy Wilson, knowing how much he loved the water. He was a big boater, a big fisherman. One of his favorite spots was right off Boca Grande, just like the rich folks, his friends would say. They enjoyed their fishing. And the fire department, of course, feels a sense of brotherhood and sisterhood with law enforcement, so they wanted to be a part of this. The first thing they did yesterday before the viewing outside the event center, they had two huge ladder trucks, and they hoisted a massive American flag between the two of them. And it really was just beautiful to see that blowing in the breeze. We had some rain and storms last night, and certainly this is a very stormy time for Deputy Wilson's family and the community in general. But the fire department also wanted to pay tribute to him on the water, so that's why they've got their fire boats out there. These would normally be used, of course, if there were a water emergency. If a boat, for example, was on fire, they would be squirting this water right on them. Fortunately, their services are not needed today, so it was an on-land and on-water tribute to Deputy Wilson that his family has been treated to. And this is a huge bond, the water, between him and his family. Remember, he met his wife on the beach. He was jet skiing. He was a water baby. Went to Port Charlotte High School and grew up in a place where water is a big part of the community. His kids, that was a big way of bonding with them. He loved to take them on camping trips. The pastor said at one point, every time you see a camper, kids, think of all the time and energy and effort your dad put into hauling you out to some of the beautiful spots throughout Southwest Florida. But he loved to get them out on the water, teach them to fish, including daughter Emily. And there were some fantastic pictures they were sharing at the viewing last night of him holding up some monster fish, and that grin that has now become known to so many people who would have never known it otherwise had he not passed in this way. Of course, the preference would be for all of us who had never heard his name before this happened to have never heard his name for the rest of our lives and just know that he was one more deputy out there doing his job. But having seen the fact that he has paid with his life. Now, I think a lot of people making the effort to know who this person was. And when you look at these boats on the water, you will know that is a big part of who Mike Wilson was. Miriam?
Yeah, Patrick, and you know, we're talking about the water and how much he loved the water. It's reminding me of when former Sheriff Bill Cameron was on stage talking about this funny story about how much Sergeant Wilson loved his truck, and he had this sign that he put on his truck. And it's in the Peace River, you know, somewhere probably right now. So it's that story now, afterward, to be able to see this outside where you are, it kind of, you know, it all makes sense that it's in there, that there's a story to be told. And I know we keep mentioning this to you, Patrick, but it just seems that about every person that we've come across has a story to tell about what he loved. He loved life. And this picture that what we can see on our TV screen, there's the water cannon, just a beautiful, beautiful shot over the Peace River, and how appropriately named.
Yes, oh, definitely. I think this is everyone here praying for peace today in the light of something so violent and really something so angering. The gunman in this case taking his own life. So there's no sense of, well, he'll be held accountable in court or he will get a punishment on this earth for what's happened. And really that has a different psychological effect, having talked to some of the folks who do police psychology, really a different psychological effect on the community and his family. The person who took Deputy Wilson's life didn't even value his own. He took himself out of the picture for his own role as a father and as a husband. So it's just something that I think a lot of us can't get our minds around, and I think that's why the pastor and a number of people, he was a Christian guy, sharing some quotes from the Bible. One of the ones that they said really defined him was, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall inherit." So definitely I think he saw himself as a peacemaker, both on the force. I'm telling you, we all know it, there are conflicts within the force, but as former Sheriff Cameron said yesterday, you put all that aside and you see an outpouring of love right now. It's happening right now in this community and throughout Southwest Florida. But I do want to say, because we've heard what a wonderful guy he is, probably everybody didn't think he was wonderful in every moment, and I will just tell you this. He was an awesome supervisor, according to everyone I talked to. And Miriam, you and I both know what it means. When you have an awesome supervisor, that means that person sometimes holds you accountable for things you'd rather not talk about and gets you to raise your game. The response times on his shift as a road supervisor, he had several different roles over the years, a school resource officer, the street crimes unit, but his last job was as the road supervisor. He really was known for cracking the whip with the deputies who were in his department. They had the highest response times and the best service, and that's according to his former boss. And this is something that's quantifiable. This isn't just something you go, yeah, he was good at his job. Trust me, he held these deputies to a very high standard. It was the standard that he set for himself and his own family. And it's really nice to know that. So Lord knows there were some grumblings back in the day. I'm sure those deputies are thanking him for pushing him come today.
Absolutely.
And the future.
And you know, we're hearing this balance, and as you say that, as you point that out, Patrick, we hear this balance between being so funny and silly. I keep saying, you know, just a silly guy is what he sounded like, and cracking these jokes and playing pranks, yet earning the respect of others at the same time. You had mentioned a little bit about his past, too, as his own childhood, that very inspirational, actually. There was a time in his life where maybe he didn't have what would be considered the best upbringing. So he knows very well what it is like and what a lot of teenagers may be dealing with. Tell me a little bit more about that, Patrick, and what you've learned as far as his own upbringing.
There is no doubt about it that he definitely had a challenging upbringing. He was raised by his grandparents, born in a small town in Illinois. They moved here when he was 13. He went to Port Charlotte High School. And I am not Dr. Phil or a psychologist, so just talking to people, and neither are the folks who knew him closely, but they will tell you that his humor was probably part of a defense mechanism early on in life. When you come from a home that's challenged sometimes, when every other kid has his dad there on Father-Son days, and you have your grandparents there, a fill-in and loving fill-ins, you're gonna feel a little bit different, and sometimes you compensate for that by being, as one of his classmates called him, a class clown. And sometimes it's uncomfortable for us in the media to talk about this side of someone who has given his life in this way, because we want to honor him and respect him, but we also know that I think he does want to be remembered with humor. And he sounded like a holy terror at Port Charlotte High, one of those ones who'd, like, you know, pull something down on your clothes and keep walking by and laughing the whole time, and you had to laugh because there was no way around it. But he brought that playful attitude in the sheriff's office, so where he might have been a pain in the neck to a couple people in high school, by the time he was in the sheriff's office, where you need to laugh to get through this job, where you're dealing with this kind of tragedy, each and every day, and then people who aren't mourning one another and instead defiant in what they do to one another, to have that light attitude, I think really helped. Miriam?
All right, Patrick, yeah, hearing these stories is great. Let's get to Sarah, where this procession is to be starting. Sarah, what's happening now?
Yeah, Miriam, the procession has just started. You can see right now the motorcycles. We see Boca Raton. We have Delray Beach Police. They're all coming by right now, and they're starting the beginning of the procession. Osceola County Sheriff. And you can see coming along. We have all of the local law enforcement saluting.
And we're watching the procession here beginning. We were talking to Sarah just a moment ago, who was on the ground, and we just saw a number of law enforcement. I believe she said law enforcement from Boca Raton. We know Sarasota. 90 different law enforcement agencies is what we're hearing are going to be present in this. This is the procession following Sergeant Michael Wilson's funeral. That's leaving the Charlotte Harbor Event Center, continuing over through US 41. You can see the flashing lights right there. Charlotte County Sheriff's Office obviously involved in this as well. We saw a number of different motorcades and also the horses that were coming through as well. The streets are lined with supporters, the American flag waving proudly in the wind there on this hot summer afternoon. As we zoom out, you can get a great look there of another American flag hanging above where these cars are going through, and all these different vehicles going through the start of the procession. It is expected to last a little bit, as there are so many different vehicles involved with this and paying respect, obviously, to take their time and going through this route that will be going through 41 to Veterans and also going past the lakes of Toscana, where Sergeant Wilson was killed. Sarah, as you watch these vehicles go through, tell us more about what you're seeing here.
Yeah, Miriam, it's still that very quiet, solemn feeling that we have going on here. A few people wiping away tears, that some of them that I spoke to who knew Sergeant Wilson and his family. And for those who didn't know him, there's still this very big air of respect going on as they watch all of these cars process. And I think everyone is really taking it in about the show of different law enforcement from all different parts of the state. So I think a lot of people are still in awe that maybe didn't get closer into the funeral itself, but really they are finally getting to see how big this really is as all of these cars start to process. And even from where I'm standing, they're still coming. It really doesn't seem like there's an immediate end that we can see now. And again, the route, it's going to go out of the Charlotte Harbor Event Center and go down onto 41. It's going to be turning onto Veterans and driving around the loop from Harbor Boulevard, and it will be passing by the Lakes of Toscana apartments. That is where Sergeant Wilson lost his life, and looping back and coming back to the event center. So all of these cars will be doing that you see here, all of them going to the processional and then coming back here so the family can have some private time alone with Sergeant Wilson. Miriam?
Right, and that, again, as we mentioned, that private time, this has been such a public event. What are you hearing right there, too, Sarah? What is that we're hearing? And I know right at the start of it, there was a roar of some of these vehicles, as you can imagine, as you even said, there's so many there. What were some of those departments that you were calling out? I heard Boca Raton, and what were some of the other ones that you see driving by there?
I see Broward County Sheriff passing me right now. We have a few cars from there. Punta Gorda, of course. We have some more, a lot of Charlotte County cars, obviously. As you can see, what you're looking at right now is they're passing under that flag. And all of the law enforcement that is standing, not driving, they're saluting as the cars go by. We have some recruits from the police academy lining the streets here, and every time those cars go by, they're saluting. So definitely a big turnout of law enforcement as well. And we have a bunch of motorcycles now that are getting ready to come out. Those are from other law enforcement officers that are riding together as a part of an honor guard, and they're going to be following the procession as well. And I talked to some of those law enforcement officers. They're from Lakeland, all over the east and west coast of Florida. So a really great representation, Miriam.
We're seeing a lot of walks of life as well, Sarah, isn't that right?
That is true. That is true. We have children, we have elderly, we have people that, you know, had no idea who Sergeant Wilson was, people who were close friends. I mean, all different people really coming out, and there's no stranger out here today. Everyone feels like that they know everyone, and they're coming together for Sergeant Wilson because they understand how important that community feeling is for something like this. As they watch all of these cars come by, we see some Northport Police and Florida State Highway Patrol, City of Sarasota Police, all of these cars just coming together and showing we're not just a unified, you know, couple counties down here. We are a unified state.
Absolutely. And country, really. We've heard from so many retired officers, maybe coming from the Northeast or coming from the Midwest and all different areas that are here visiting or that have transplanted down here to Florida, and how it hits home to them like it's one of their own. Sarah, I'm getting a sense of patriotism as well as I watch this, with the American flags waving proudly in the wind, from children holding them. We talked earlier about parents sort of teaching lessons through all of this. It feels so much bigger than anybody could imagine, really.
Right. I mean, it's almost like a 4th of July showing out here in terms of the flags and the red, white, and blue and the colors. And I mean, it all centers around that big flag that you guys saw earlier that the fire department raised. I mean, every car is going under that. I'm looking, you know, little girls, 2-year-old little girls holding those flags and waving them proudly. So they're understanding that this is, you know, this is about, you know, representing and remembering those that fight for our freedoms every day. So it goes way bigger and deeper than just, you know, one police department, one sheriff's office.
Yes, and while we're watching this and paying honor to it, we can see other officers still working, still directing traffic, and it seems very controlled, very smooth. Everybody knows where they're going and what they're doing, right, obviously?
Right, exactly. It's like a well-oiled machine almost going on here. Everyone knows where they're supposed to be. The route, the public has been great in terms of following directions, making sure that they're in the right place and not in the way. I mean, I haven't seen any law enforcement officer have to tell anyone, you know, they can't do this, they can't do that. Everything seems to be running very, very smoothly because I think everyone wants, you know, to make sure everything goes very smoothly. Now you can see, kind of wrapping up here, we have the last of the cars pulling out over here and moving. We have some of the spectators can kind of move around a little bit more as the roads start to open up. So you can see these last cars are coming around the bend, and then even farther we have all those lights illuminated. We have so many more law enforcement vehicles with their lights on, ready to join the processional back here.
You know, Sarah, watching this from the camera lens anyway, you can probably sense almost every emotion as well coming through here. These are not just vehicles riding through our hot pavement. There are so many emotions that go along with such a symbolic tradition in this procession.
It is. It really is. No one's talking about, oh, it's hot out here. No one's complaining. It's not just cars driving around, and you're not just witnessing another routine, big show of law enforcement. It really is more than that. As you're standing by, you're showing your respect for these other officers that put their lives on the line every day. And I think that's the way that everyone said that Sergeant Wilson would want to be remembered, to support the rest of his colleagues and his friends and just show the united front that he was a part of.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Sarah. Our Patrick Nolan has been outside of the Charlotte Harbor Event Center all morning long, where it looks empty behind you now, Patrick. We can see that tent right now. Talk to us about what's happening now.
Well, you can hear the sound of the chopper overhead here. As you saw earlier in the service, there was the flyover. They were in a triangle position. And the gut-wrenching part is when that one chopper on the left, if you're facing the choppers, breaks away. It's symbolic of that officer moving away from the group after working as a team for his entire life, not just in law enforcement, but as a father, as a brother, and as a husband. He has now broken away in the sense that no longer with all those who love him here in this community. I can tell you the media coverage has been intense. I'll show you just some of the cameras that are set up around here that have all been trained on what's going on here. I think it has brought people together in so many ways. And we've heard that from people throughout the community, and that includes the media. We're all telling the same story and doing our best to tell it in a respectful way, in a way that hopefully will let the family of Sergeant Wilson know how much he was deeply appreciated by all those, not just who knew him and loved him and laughed with him and cried with him and now cry for him, but those of us who never met him but can appreciate, deeply appreciate someone who would put his own life on the line to protect someone like you or me without even knowing us. It's a deep honor to have covered this story here, Miriam, and I think we're very grateful to the family. I hope that they know it.
Yes, absolutely. And I know, the media gets a lot of criticism too, Patrick, like you said sometimes, but I'm so glad you said that, because we would like to make sure that we are honoring these families and all that they do, because they do protect everybody in our own communities that we care about. So the family has been very outspoken in saying that they're grateful that we were able to bring this coverage, because obviously Sergeant Wilson meant so much, and it's a difficult time for this family. We're taking a live look right now. You can see the lights flashing on one of these vehicles here, and the signs even in the background there, Charlotte County, the palm trees hanging over Southwest Florida this morning on a hot August afternoon. This is the procession that is continuing here. It just started a few minutes ago with a loud roar from some of the vehicles, from the motorcycles and motorcades that are coming through, and the representation of law enforcement throughout really the entire state. We saw Boca Raton, Northport police departments as well, fire and EMS, even the fire boats that were out on the water, and then also in the air, the helicopters. This is the final look here of the procession going through that beautiful American flag here out of Charlotte County. And that procession is expected to return back to Charlotte Harbor Event Center around, we were hearing 2 o'clock. It's about to be 1 o'clock here in just a minute. But we also will be returning to our regularly scheduled programming here in just a bit. But we do want to remind you to visit fox4now.com for video of today's services. While there, you can also find out how you can help Sergeant Wilson's family. We've heard from a lot of you on how you would like to do that. That information is set up along with it. I contribute. This is where we want to see if you have any pictures to share. You have this address on the bottom of your screen at I contribute at fox4now.com to send any pictures to share with us if you were able to be by the area as well this morning, as so many of you have shown so much support. We will have complete coverage of today's services, including interviews with Sergeant Wilson's friends and families. It's going to be starting tonight on Fox 4 News at 10. I'm Miriam Zamorano. Thank you so much for joining us.